Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the next session, booking agents versus talent buyers. We like the odds down here today. This is looking pretty good. And I'm going to turn it over to our host, Bruce Nicholas, who's moderating this session. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Bruce. I'm the owner of Rockin' Rudy's downtown, or near downtown. And I don't know why I've been selected, other than I'm friends with Tom Webster, to do this, but we have a very distinguished panel, and from sitting through the last couple of presentations, I think we've got an idea, or I have an idea of what you're looking for, and I think the main object here is to just find out what's going on in various areas of the music business. And Alanya was right, hit the nail right on the top of the head when she said that the driving force in all of these businesses, whether it be the startup, the 10 Club, the Top Hat, Log Jam, it's all about the music. And I think that everybody really, to be in this business, has to have that fire going on inside of them. That's what's kept me going since I was a high schooler in the early 60s, and I used to go to Y dances and used to listen to my first rhythm and blues, Ray Charles, What'd I Say, and I'm a long, tall Texan. That was those were the last two songs that were played at 5 to 9, so we could get home by 9:15. But anyway, it sparked in me. I was in bands. I played trombone and most brass instruments. I was in the pep band. I was in the marching band. And again, it was just that fire that music creates in people. And I was just speaking to someone up here, and one of my lifelong bummers is how the record companies have treated the whole idea of music, and that in their hands they had the best drug ever conceived in the world, and that's the song and the presentation of that and what that does and how that affects people. And the record companies in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, they were greedy. They tried to get top dollar, $16.99, $15.99. They priced music fans out of the business. And my philosophy was, let's sell them all for $8.99 or $9.99. My sales would be triple what they are now. There's not a person that came into my shop that bought 1 or 2 CDs that wouldn't have bought 3, 4, and 5 if the pricing was right. And so now we have a system where that music is way more accessible at a more accessible price. But we've also lost some of the cultural things that have gone along with that. Anyway, long story short, I'd like to have, when we open up for questions, I'd be more than happy to offer any insight to the music business as far as retail sales go and things like that. I opened my first store in 1973. I'm a journalism graduate from the University of Oregon. In the early 70s, I was the concert promoter at the University of Oregon, and did Neil Young, John Denver, Van Morrison at the MacArthur Court, the big basketball pavilion there. So I've had some experience in that. And then when I came to Missoula in 1982, we had the Blues and Jazz Society, and we've done a number of small time promotions. We did some things, some concerts at the Top Hat. Our very first show was in the basement of the Moose, which is now City Hall, and it was DOA, a Vancouver punk band, and they had a new album out at that time called Let's Wreck the Party. So we made the posters up, "Let's Wreck the Moose," which was kind of the wrong way to present the act. The Moosians didn't particularly care for that much, but anyway, I've been in the music business, and the reason I am a retail record store owner is because I absolutely still have the spark that is, to get the new Pearl Jam, the triple album, and to be able to go and put that on and listen to it. I'm looking for my next fix, my next music way to get something I can share, and that's one of the most beautiful things about being in retail is people come in, they kind of pick your brain, they talk to you a little bit. One of the most gives me goosebumps right now is if you can gain their confidence and you can say, "Hey, try this, check this out," and they go, "Wow, this is great." That's as high as a guy can get. And that's when I moved here in '82. I'd gone through I had a record store in Bend, Oregon for almost 10 years, and interest rates at that time, prime rate reached in 1981 19%. So if you borrowed anything from the bank, and I was the kind of person, I had a successful business, but I was all in, and I owed a lot of money. I lost everything. So another Alanya story, you gotta pick yourself up and just keep going. I moved here in 1982 with my used record collection, and not an original idea, but the idea that we could rent records. I mean, hell, video stores at that time were like a dime a dozen. They were everywhere. They were renting movies. Why couldn't we rent records? And so then the record companies had Congress pass a law that said you couldn't rent records. But Tim and my other partner, Vaughn, we just went for it anyway. And we were able to continue to rent records for almost 2 years after they passed the federal law, mainly because we were in Missoula, Montana, and no one ever came here back in those days. I mean, now Nick has got this like Austin, Texas here. I mean, there's people coming in from all over the place. But anyway, we rented records, and it was fantastic. I bet we had close to 5,000 members in our rental club. Cost you $5 to join. You got an Elvis trading card with a number on it. And you could rent records for $2 a piece, 3 for $5. You could keep them for 2 days, and they were LPs back then, so they degraded and stuff, and we had to continue to replace them. But it was so fantastic because people could try things. They could experiment, and they found whole new genres of music that they liked. Today is a lot more like that because you are allowed to experiment and to access a wide range of music. Anyway, enough about me, Rockin' Rudy's, and my legal troubles. I'd like to, I got a few more too. Maybe we'll get into them later. I'd like to introduce our illustrious panel. Nick Chakota, the owner-operator of 3 venues in town. Log Jam Presents, a fantastic food spot, and he's been here for how many years now, Nick?
About 10 years.
10 years, and he's owned the Top Hat for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he has changed the face of music in Missoula. So we're going to want to ask some questions and get some insight from him. Let's see, Austin right here, ex-Grizz, graduate of the program. I guess I shouldn't be telling a lot. I'll let them explain who they are and what their position is now in the business. And Scott Osborne, another graduate here of the program, and intern of Tom Webster's, and he runs Lights All Night in Dallas, which is a giant EDM festival that's held New Year's?
The last weekend of the year, so
Yeah.
New Year's weekend.
Okay, New Year's weekend. So anyway, Nick, you want to just give us a little, you've enlightened us before, but
Was everybody here from the prior? Anyone wasn't here from during the last panel? Okay, real quick, Nick Shakota, I own Logjam Presents, we own the Wilma, Top Hat, Kettle House Amphitheater, and now running the Osprey Stadium or Ogren Park, 10,000 capacity ballpark, and we're also, one thing I didn't mention is we're opening a 1,500 capacity room in Bozeman, Montana.
Hi, Austin Mullins. I'm a booking agent at WME in our Nashville office. Grew up in Great Falls, Montana, and yeah, graduate of the UMEM program here. Also here because I'm a friend of Tom Webster's, as I think everyone up here is. I work in our country department and specifically book clubs in the southeastern United States.
Hello, my name is Scott Osborne. I'm an ex-Grizz, friend, and apprentice of Tom Webster's. I started a music festival about 9 years in Dallas called Lights All Night, and we're still producing the fest. We do about 30,000 people over 2 days every year, in addition to a number of club shows and kind of one-off shows in Dallas. And I'm essentially the talent buyer, marketing, festival production, and everything in between kind of guy for our festival in Dallas.
Can you just enlighten us on what that means? I mean, your festival is over. What's next now? How do you go about planning the next year's event, and what does that entail?
Okay, so our upcoming festival is actually this year, so it'll be on December 28th and 29th. And, you know, I talent buy 365 days a year at this point. I'm already talent buying for next year's festival. And then in between the time of booking over 50 artists who can range anywhere in the price range of $500 all the way up to $400,000 per artist, I'm then liaising their travel into the event and out of the event, and dealing with egress and ingress of 15,000 people a day, which deals with working with the city of Dallas, fire marshals, in addition to that, orchestrating production, design, concessions, and every single thing that you could think that happens within a mass gathering.
How about security?
Security, we have basically a fire marshal approved plan. So we have one main room that's 100,000 square feet, and then another room that's attached to it that's 70,000 square feet, with approximately another 30,000 square feet of outside space that we fully secure the perimeter, and we work with consultants who actually used to be Dallas police officers in the events kind of sector of Dallas. Like, so they were in charge of whenever there'd be a Super Bowl or a mass gathering in Dallas, and so we work with them, who then work with the chiefs in their respective departments with the city, and then we work with a local staffing company that deals with all the safety and logistics aspects.
Do you have a problem with security or with medical issues at these EDM shows?
Yeah, I mean, we are, I think sometimes EDM gets a bad rap, but at the same time too, like, we're definitely more of a party-focused event, for sure, and we have young kids that are coming to our event and potentially experimenting with drugs and doing things for the first time. So I not only become a producer, but I become a babysitter for 30,000 kids over 2 days, once a year. And so in doing so, though, we have a really robust plan, we always have. We used to work in city-owned and operated facilities in Dallas, and so by doing so, the political ramifications of something happening were much more severe than if you were in a privately held space. And so we go to the extent of having drug dogs and pat downs and roaming search and undercover police officers, mainly to stop the influx of any type of dealing of drugs or mass consumption of drugs. We're not necessarily there trying to hurt a patron or get rid of a patron who may be making a personal decision. We're not the moral police, but we're certainly there to make sure that people aren't, doing anything that's going to put them in serious harm.
And how many arrests did you have at the last show?
We do pretty well on arrests and medical, to be completely honest. I think last year we had 1 arrest and we had 2 transports over the entire 2 days. So 2 people out of 30,000, I think is a pretty good percentage. And I think we can attribute a lot of that to probably the drug dog operations, and just the culture that we've created over the last 9 years. It's kind of a, you know, if you're gonna go to Lights All Night, this isn't that type of place. Like, we're here to throw a massive, crazy, cool event with massive production and experiential art, but not necessarily there to be a crazy ruckus crowd. So.
Nick, do you have security problems?
You know, I don't think we have security problems. We take a different approach to security in that we have more of a, I consider it a hospitality type of staff. We really try to treat our customers in a respectful and kind of customer-oriented way. So security, I would not say, is a big issue for us. I think last year altogether through all of our venues, we probably only had 1 or 2 times where we've actually pressed charges.
How about, do you, Austin, when you're booking, is security an issue or?
I have never been arrested.
Can anyone dispute that?
Call Rico, Missoula Police Department, he can prove it. You know, my responsibility in regards to, at least what we do and how our relationships interact, I am solely concerned about police or security on how it affects my artist. You know, it's not that I'm a mean person and don't care about the safety of the fans, because that is 100% taken into account, because if the fans aren't happy, the artist isn't going to be happy. But, you know, we have plenty of artists that require, police escorts or security escorts. You know, I've had artists that require to be ushered throughout the building with an armed police officer the entire time. So what I'm taking into account are the specific needs of particular artists, or if it's an event that it's a large festival, if it's a first-year festival, that is going to be a question. Like, have you done your due diligence with the city or the county, whether it's the city police force or the county sheriff's office, to make sure that there's adequate, protection there, to make sure that artists can get in and out without potentially being mobbed, or that, people aren't going to be running in and out and, getting in the way, or, going after an artist. Because, we've seen in the last couple of years there, the pop artist down in Florida, where she was at a meet and greet and a random person just ran up and shot her and killed her. So that is, sort of a different example, and, probably a topic that is different than what we're doing here today. But, it falls upon me to make sure that those needs are met, and that if it is a first-year event, to do the due diligence, making sure of asking those questions. Because if it ever comes back on me that I just didn't even look into it, that's not going to be a good thing.
So do you attend many of the shows that you book, or that you?
Personally, I don't like to go to shows I book, because if anything goes wrong, I'm there to get yelled at. But no, that's sort of a facetious remark, but I happen to be in a good position where I live in the same territory that I book. So I can easily drive to shows I book, and Nashville, where I live, is also a city that is part of my territory, so I can go to a lot of those shows. Now, if there are first-year events where I want to see how it goes, and I want to, maybe they're not artists that I'm responsible for, but they are clients of my company, I do want to be there to make sure things go smoothly. But by and large, oftentimes when I'm visiting a show, it may be to see the buyer for the show and, massage that relationship. Or more often than not, it's more to have face-to-face time with my client on the road. As an agent, you want to be on the road with your clients at different times to make sure that they know that you care. Because at the end of the day, my number one priority is the client. Unfortunately, these guys take second priority, but it's a close second. But, I don't have a job if the artist doesn't exist and he's not a client, at the end of the day.
So how do you affect, you're booking in your area, your regional area, but how would you choose, whether it's Nick's show or it's a show at the fairgrounds or something like that? Where does that, how do you, is Nick calling you or are you?
Yeah, I definitely have promoters that call me and they're like, hey man, I'd love for you to come to a show or come see you at the venue or come hang out. Because even if we were selling insurance to each other, I think that a personal relationship needs to be built upon no matter what. You know, if Scott was just in Nashville a couple weeks ago, and granted, we've known each other for a real long time, like, we're gonna say hi to each other. You know, that those relationships need to always be there. As far as like what goes into play for me deciding which shows to go to for a particular client of mine, you know, you just take into account everything. Maybe one of the shows is a sold out show and you want to be there to celebrate with an artist, or maybe it's their first time playing a very important market like a New York City or LA, and so you want to be there for that, because at the end of the day, we're all three of us here are dealing with a product that has a heartbeat and a mind of its own. You know, we could be, like I said, insurance or selling houses, but we are selling insurance or houses that is able to call you the next day and be pissed at you. So you want to treat them like human beings and not just selling them off and putting them in positions. So you need to be there for the good times, you need to be there for the bad times, and when selecting a particular time to be at a show, you just take everything into account that you could, whether it's the market, the tickets sold, the particular type of event, whether it's a club or a festival, maybe it's their hometown show, the buyer, you know. If I were to sell a show with Nick and it was a sold out show at the Top Hat and I had an excuse to come to Missoula and hang out with Nick all night, of course, why not?
So Nick, can you maybe tell us how you've gone about coming to Missoula with no real musical experience, but yet being, how do you select the acts? And then, not trying to blow smoke up your chimney, but it seems like you've done a pretty damn good job of, being varied, and the shows seem like they're doing very well. How do you choose with the myriad of acts that are available?
You know, when we first bought the Top Hat and remodeled the Top Hat, it was hard. We didn't have a relationship with a lot of agents, so we had to convince them as a new promoter in a room that hadn't been doing, a few years prior, hadn't been doing a lot of national acts through the room. That was the first real challenge, is just to get the agents' attention and to get them to consider us as a venue where they should be putting their artists. Once we took over the Wilma, I think we got a little bit more attention. We put a lot of money into the Wilma and brought it up to be one of the nicer rooms in the western United States, we feel. And so that, you started to elevate, you moved to a different level of agent from as a buyer, and started to get more attention at that level. And then the game for us really started to change when we built the Kettle House Amphitheater, now at a 4,200 capacity venue. And I think we started to get more notoriety with the agent community, and so it let us have more opportunity to buy. From a standpoint of how we get it, it really comes in two ways. I'd say about 25% of our acts are us out there. Well, originally it was probably 75% of our acts are us out there calling agents, trying to get them to route their artists into our area. Over time, I'd say now that's about 25%. I'd say the 75% now are coming to us. With Avails, I think we're seen as no longer as a stop that you fit us in on the way between Denver and Seattle, but now Missoula is starting to be seen as a destination type of market. I was just down meeting with WME folks down in LA, and they told us we were the fastest room, Kettle House was the fastest room to sell Sheryl Crow out, was the only room to sell of our size to sell the Pixies out. We were one of the best-selling shows on the Trombone Shorty package tour, and when you went down their list, we were right up there with the Seattle and Portland markets. And I think as we perform with the ticket sales and Missoula consumes music at the rate that they're consuming music, we're starting to get a better and better reputation, and we're seeing more and more avails. So that's, I'd say it's mostly at this point our agents coming to us with avails.
Well, before you stop that, I just have this, well, I guess it was generated by you, and I'd like to say, whoever's doing your promotion and the way they promote you and your business, they're doing a goddamn good job. Because,
Ryan, who's actually graduated this program, Ryan Torres, yeah.
Anyway, it says Logjam Presents makes top 100 promoters worldwide. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, Polestar, which if you're not familiar with Polestar, it's an industry kind of trade organization that tracks ticket sales, tracks tour numbers for the agents, and we broke into the top 100, which is really an amazing feat given 100% of our tickets were sold in the Missoula market. So we're not only ranked as a top 100 promoter in the world based on ticket sales, but we're ranked up with other organizations. We're ahead of an organization that just got bought by Live Nation, Emporium Presents, and others that that buy shows all over the country, where our entire ranking is based off of the 3 rooms that we own in Missoula, Montana. So it really is a testament to how much music this community is buying, and that's driving probably the majority of our success. But it's been our goal of our organization to get in that top 100, and we were thrilled when we got there. It's a big milestone for us.
I was happy to see that there were so many songwriters that raised their hand. Would you do that one more time? Can you expand on how they would, since you're from Nashville, and in my mind that seems to be the number one place where you go with your songs to reach some success. That's not your area of expertise, but I mean, do they just move to Nashville and start hanging out at a venue? And I mean, how do they break into that business? And
I've just been hanging out everywhere, and that's how I ended up here. I hung around Tom Webster's theater enough that he let me be an intern for him, and hung around UM Productions enough that you know, even though I also played football here, I didn't have enough time to be a full-time employee, that they finally let me start unloading trucks and stuff for them. So I think no matter what you want to do, whether you're an artist or, you know, person wants to be a buyer or an agent, you have to completely submerge yourself at some point in your career into what you're doing. Does that mean that you have to uproot yourself and go somewhere? Maybe, possibly. Depends on what you want to do. You know, one of the bigger songwriters in Nashville right now, who is from Billings, Montana, John Pierce, whose family owns Pierce Flooring around Montana, went to Nashville for a day and got a record deal. And now, you know, he's written Sweet Annie that Zach Brown made #1. He's got 2 cuts on the new John Party record. He has 3 cuts on the last Chris Young record. You know, that is an example of someone who didn't necessarily submerge himself and get there, but he's there now full time. And his network would never have grown to what it is now had he not made the move. I think also at the same time, you know, MySpace was the thing. He didn't have all the options of social media and things like that now today, where you can create a network without necessarily having to physically be in a place. But I think at some point, you have to be physically somewhere to create the connections as deep as you want them to be. And so whether that's Austin or New York or LA or Nashville, you know, if you don't put yourself in those positions where you're actually physically playing in front of someone, shaking their hands or whatever, like, the connection isn't going to be there as well. Because if you're a songwriter or an artist, you know, we're here talking about the live music experience and how well that's doing. You know, that's where the connection is made, in the live person-to-person experience. So I don't care if you're, you know, trying to sell shoes to someone or, you know, pitch yourself as a songwriter. You need to be face-to-face eventually.
Scott, how do you, you mentioned that you're already booking acts for a year and a half from now, or a year plus in advance. How do you, are you offering them big bucks and knowing that there's a possibility that they are passé at that time? Are you, is that a concern? How do you see into the future as far as the success of artists that you want at your show next year?
So that's a big question. I mean, you know, I'm in a market that in Dallas with the Metroplex is like 7 or 8 million people. Live Nation has a stronghold on that market, from rooms that range anywhere from 300 all the way up to the ability to book, you know, the Taylor Swifts of the world, which that's AEG, but you know, AEG and Live Nation have the ability to book the Taylor Swifts of the world and then control every single room all the way down to Houston and Austin. And then you've got C3 Presents, which was just, you know, majority stake was bought by Live Nation, sitting down in Austin, producing a music festival, ACL, and then all of the other kind of music festivals going on. So for me, the main motivation today for reaching out to an artist a year and a half in advance is that I'm, you know, as an independent who doesn't have 3 or 4 other music festivals or, you know, a handful of rooms to be able to leverage throughout the year, I've got to do everything I can to kind of get ahead of these larger organizations who may have red tape that don't allow them to book a year and a half in advance. And by doing that, I've also in the last year or so gone out and created relationships with up and coming festivals where I've essentially come on as a management consultant and a talent buyer to bring in my leverage. So now that I have equity in some of these other events that are in Houston and Austin and San Antonio, I'm actually working on, if I'm booking for a headliner for Lights All Night, I'm working to get them on a couple shows in Q1 and Q2 so I can have a really strong offer against any of the other festivals so I don't get beat up by radiuses. So that's a big motivation today, is to get some of the anchor guys in the festival. So from there I can kind of build around. And you know, by doing that, one of the artists that I'm going after now, you know, he played a couple years ago. There's another artist I'd like to get, but you know, essentially they're like, we're ready to book and we're ready to do this. So for me to be able to get something done this far in advance at least puts a stake in the ground that I can build around. So that's kind of one strategy. And then in terms of, you know, I think we touched on it in the panel the other day, you know, the up and coming acts, that's kind of that's the name of the game, and that's where you want to be every year. And I mean, there's been opportunities for us where we've gotten a lot of artists on the app. Like we were, you know, in 2012 we booked Avicii, which is one of the biggest, you know, up and coming DJs of all time, especially at that time. And you know, we noticed that their stage is, you know, there's 2 times as many people there as any other stage. And so getting on that is just keeping the ear to the ground. Where I'm at in life, I mean, I still have my ear to the ground in the music, but I have a lot of people that are a lot younger than me that are at the clubs every single night, every single weekend, embedded in the culture more so than I can be, just because I'm just not 21 years old anymore. And that's been a huge point of success for me. And as a talent buyer, when I first started, it's all about holding on. At least this is how it was for me. It was about holding on, and you know, I was in my early 20s and wanting and really knowing what was going on and making those decisions. And I've gotten a really strong, trusting core of people around me now that I can put a lot of faith in when making decisions like that.
Could I want to touch on one thing, follow up there. You know, one of the big things for us that's changing everything is the Live Nation equation, where they're buying up everybody. I mean, Live Nation just bought Emporium. They've acquired the Frank Brothers in Madison. I mean, they're buying up all the independent promoters, and independent promoters are quickly becoming at a disadvantage. I'd love to know from your perspective, if you have an artist that a Live Nation is looking at, and you have independent promoter in a market, what's causing you to go with that independent promoter when you do, and how do you fight off that urge to, I mean, is it simply money, or if a Live Nation's buying 20 dates and that independent promoter can only buy 1? It'd be really interesting to get a WME perspective on how they choose to go with the independent versus a Live Nation, if you choose to. I think that'd be interesting.
Thank you, Nick.
Sitting next to 2 independent promoters.
Love it. That's a great question.
So you two are at a disadvantage because you're talking to an agent who books primarily artists playing rooms that are non-Live Nation. So, but although I constantly see artists who do work a lot with Live Nation, maybe primarily with Live Nation or the Messina Group with AEG, but even, you know, Brad Garrett at Police Productions, who is an independent. At the end of the day, as an agent, what you're looking to do is grow an artist, hopefully, at least at WME, who, you know, we represent the biggest artists in the world, that will one day be selling out art arenas and stadiums. And, you know, one of the best ways to do that, or one of the, you know, best results from that, is having a promoter who can do multiple dates across the country without having to go to a different person in every single market. And so over time, large companies like AEG and Live Nation have secured, you know, holds in all these various primary, secondary, and tertiary markets by either, you know, being the primary buyer for a venue or, you know, buying up independent promoters. And so eventually, as you take an artist from a club level to hopefully an arena level, at one point you can strike one deal that covers 60 dates and then you're done, as opposed to having to do 60 individual deals. Now, to your question, in my world, I'll give you an example. Atlanta, Georgia is one of the cities I deal with in my territory. I primarily deal with Sean McPherson at Smith's Old Bar, which is a very well-known room for that area. It's a 300 capacity room, and his main competition is Eddie's Attic, which is 175 capacity, and it's booked by Live Nation. I put the majority of my acts, my personal acts that I'm responsible for, in Smith's Old Bar. And the reason being is I have a way better relationship with Sean McPherson than I do with Andy Hingley. And we have just got along better on a personal level. He gives my artists better deals. He promotes better. And at the end of the day, why wouldn't you go with the person that treats you as a human better, treats your artist better, and your artist makes more money? And they make more money as the promoter. And it's not because Andy is any worse of a promoter, it's because he works for Live Nation, who books 5 other rooms in the same market. He's busy, he's stretched thin. And so, you know, at the end of the day, I think to answer your question is, it's just relationships. You know, the people who are at the head of my office right now have gotten to that point because they had relationships with national promoters who started off as, you know, the club guy in a market and eventually became the heads of Live Nation, just like they became the heads of WME, and they were so tight that they started structuring deals. And since then, it's just a trickle-down effect. You know, you get, you know, it becomes a thing where, hey, an artist is doing well, they've done well in these 10 markets, you know, why not just call Live Nation and pick their 10 rooms? And I'm just, you know, expounding and saying that I think that might be where that lies. But for me, at the end of the day, it's going to be, who do I trust more? And that's a word you used, even talking about people you work with, not even on the artist level, but it's trust. And if you can't trust someone to do a good job with your artist, then it's not worth going with them just because the deal might be technically, you know, quote unquote, easier. So, relationships and trust is what I'll always go with at the end of the day. And, you know, if I do have an artist that can do a 30-day, 60-day Live Nation deal, and it's the best thing for them and I trust it, then yeah. But I'm not gonna overlook anyone else's opinion because of that, because I'm gonna do what's best for my artist and what I'm most comfortable with at the end of the day.
So I've got a question for you. I don't know if everyone's seen just kind of what's been going on in the festival marketplace and just live event space as a whole, but I mean, we've seen, you know, anything from the Pembertons of the world to the festivals in Missouri. I mean, what do you see? You talk about, you know, year one, and we were talking about security and making sure that the promoter's the right person. But I mean, you know, and Geiger made a big statement after Pemberton about just the relationship between the events and artists and funding of the events. I mean, what does the space look like for you guys right now, and especially when it comes to vetting larger events and year one promoters and the financial side and the downfall? And then in addition to that question, what is your thought process on the cyclical cycle of festivals and how, you know, one bad year can completely wipe an artist, a festival team, a brand, a good brand that's been in existence for a long time off the map? And is there any leeway moving forward where there's going to be some give and take on the artist management agency side?
That's a lot.
Sorry.
It is. Dude, write these out. I was actually thinking of a great answer to your first question, and then you started going off on the second one. I think that, what was the first question?
What do you, I mean, when you're going and vetting year one
Yes,
festivals
so
and
I
how
think-
that relates to?
I think that agencies overall have grown very, very fast because the live music industry has grown very fast. And I have a tendency to think very old school and be very, not overly concerned, but I want to make sure 100% that the money behind the event is real. And I think maybe this is just overall as companies get bigger, whether it's WME, CAA, Live Nation, AEG, you know, sometimes people forget to cross a T or dot an I. If an agent is doing their job and making sure that the money is real and that they're not putting their artists in a bad position and communicating that, which is something Maria talked about earlier, making sure that you are communicating as the selling agent to the responsible agent of, I don't think this is a good idea. I am worried about this for sure, but it is my, you know, it is my duty to say I have an offer for your artist here. You know, so many of those predicaments can be avoided if you're just doing your due diligence, making sure the money is real, and communicating that to the responsible agents. You know, Ron Baird, who was one of the people that started the UMEM program and started CAA in Nashville, he had 3 rules as an agent: get the money, and get the money. If the money isn't there, the show doesn't happen and the artist doesn't show up. So if you're doing your due diligence and are communicating it properly, there shouldn't be an issue. Now, what was the second question?
So the second question is, and you know, it's an interesting world. Like, I think festivals are so important for so many reasons, but just in artist development and in, you know, up and coming and established. And so, I mean, is there any potential consideration in the market moving forward where if a festival's been around for X amount of years and for whatever reason they just have, whether it's catastrophic weather events, which obviously are, you know, event cancellation helps with a lot of that, but, or just a down year for, you know, too much content output via a company like Live Nation or AG, like, where's the potential give and take, you know, where it's, if a big fest is like, look, we're gonna lose a couple $1 million this year, this is gonna kill us forever, you know, are those conversations happening with reduced fees and things like that, or is it, we agree to a fee, this is what it is? Because I just think the ecosystem is at a tipping point now where we're gonna see potentially more cancellations.
Yeah. And that, what makes that so difficult is that you're dealing with so many personalities. Because it's not whether or not me as the agent, whether I want to help you, because I do. You're talking about the manager, you're talking about the artist, you're talking about the business manager calling them and saying, no, you can't do that. And you're talking about 30 artists. So all of a sudden now we've got 160 people and their opinions on whether or not to do it. And so, you know, you mentioned Geiger, who is the worldwide head of music at WME. we do get together internally, and we do discuss it, and we do try to make a strategy. We are people too, although I did go get my annual checkup, and my doctor was surprised that I had a heart when he found out I was an agent. But we do consider those relationships. And I mean, it sucks as an agent, talking to someone on the phone that literally just said, I had to mortgage my house for the 3rd time to pay your artist. And if this show doesn't sell, my wife is gonna leave me. Those conversations happen.
Paul Tollett, who started Coachella, lost his house, his wife, and his business starting Coachella, right?
Mm-hmm.
And without help from Silva and Geiger and Mueller, okay, he'd have probably been out of business permanently.
Yeah,
True story.
there's a great example of
And now it's
agents
the biggest festival.
coming to help. Exactly. You know, and to oversimplify it in a way is, you know, if you don't have $20 in your pocket, don't go down to the casino and put $40 on black. That's,
Very true.
you know, that is a very true thing.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, I don't want to speak for you, but being a promoter is high risk and high reward. And on the flip side, I'm a salaried employee, and, you know, other than losing my job, I'm not gonna show up and someone's sending me a bill for selling a bad show. So you do have to be a human and consider that at the same time. And so yes, we do sit down internally, and it has happened in the past, and there are examples of it happening. But as this industry on the live side continues to grow and grow and grow, and you know, it used to be, when I was an assistant, it was always talked about, it takes at least 3 years for a festival to make money. So you gotta realize, for the first 3 years, you're gonna lose money, and you lose money. But it's probably more than 3 years.
It can be, yeah.
It can be.
Absolutely.
And, you know, if you haven't done your proper, you know, capital behind the event, it's probably not gonna work out in the long run.
Yeah.
But your relationships within, you know, if you had a down year, I think you could say you have made yourself close enough with plenty of people.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I have. I've had down years and experienced that with agencies. I just wondered, and I think those are all great answers. And it's just interesting to see these music festivals that even are run by Live Nation and AG this year that are going out of business too, and wondering where those give and
If you
takes
read the
are.
if you're smart, you should read the Live Nation conference call, okay? Rapino talks repeatedly about his flywheel, okay? What is his flywheel, okay? He has a management company, he has a ticketing company, he has a massive sponsorship business, and he's in the concert business, okay? And for in order that flywheel to work, okay, he has to keep pushing concerts and stuff into that flywheel, okay? And he generates money from all those things, okay? If you look at what's going on in the marketplace, that flywheel is now pushing so much stuff, and the guarantees are so high, because he's got to keep pushing, he's got to keep feeding the flywheel, okay? And they pretty much put more stuff into, I just see LA, right? There's way more stuff in the marketplace in LA than the market can absorb, okay? So if you're a small promoter, and even if you're not thinking you're competing against Live Nation, you probably are on some level, because the talent fees are going so high, okay? And, I mean,
If you're not competing against
You're-
Live Nation, you better be ready to, I think, is
Yeah.
they're buying everything, but just, you gotta be really careful if you're a small promoter competing against that flywheel.
Oh, absolutely.
And the
Absolutely.
prices are going up, and, you know, my college roommate was Dave Schmidt, who ran the Waymore station for Geiger for years, right? And he was laughing about what, literally at the end before he retired, was laughing about the artist guarantees going because of festivals and repeating the flywheel and everything else. You gotta be really smart as a promoter today, competing against that.
Absolutely.
So, are you guys getting bought by Live Nation?
Not a chance.
I want to ask questions.
I mean, I think to be honest, for my business, I've been in conversation. We built an electronic dance music festival when it was just blowing up, and you know, everyone was out there trying to build out a company, and SFX was out there and came and went through Lifestyle. We got a lot of different types of offers that just didn't make sense for us at that time, but to be honest with you guys, where I'm at in my business and talking about that flywheel and all that content output, it only makes sense for me to get a deal done with one of the bigger promoters in the market.
You probably can't survive long-term.
Correct, absolutely. I mean, part of my plan in the next year or two is to get that done. And I mean, today, right now, I'm in pretty robust conversations with Live Nation in the market, amongst some other independent promoters as well. But, where I'm at in my business is I'm just making every agreement and every single thing that I do, every process, from accounting to legal to venue agreement to relationships in the industry, as ironclad as possible prior to really signing on the dotted line and making that happen. So I can at least be in a position to, hold on and work with them and hopefully build with them as well.
It's all interesting until there's Live Nation, and I'm a WME agent, or I'm a CAA agent, or a Paradigm agent, and I have essentially one buyer. I think the agency world will regret where they let themselves get, because at some point, just economics of an industry, when you have one buyer, the economics of the industry are going to change.
And one of the reasons it's changed, and Brian Murphy, passed away a couple years ago, but back in the, back when I got started, right, he made a really interesting comment to me a couple of years ago, right? There's only a handful of guys, and Nick, you're one of those guys, okay, who are promoting shows with their own money, okay? And that's really a big deal, because you have all these Live Nation guys. And I've talked to a couple Live Nation promoters that have been bought by Live Nation, okay? And they would never pay the guarantee that they're paying now, okay, if it was their money, okay? But you're kind of sucked into that world, okay, because you're competing for artist talent, right? And the artists are getting paid stupid money.
Absolutely, and then fighting, radius clauses, all of the, putting
All of the
action.
above.
All of the above, yeah, absolutely.
All of the above.
So,
But, and Nick, you make a great point, but it's going to be interesting to see where all that works out.
We'll have one agency and one promoter, which will not be good for the customer.
and both boards will sit on both boards.
Yeah.
Had a question up here?
I do, and it's really for Nick, but the whole panel can weigh in. But Nick, I'm curious what you see in the live music industry in Montana. I know all this discussion of Live Nation is more major markets, but all across Montana, you take out the Billings, Bozeman, and Missoula markets, you have a lot of very smaller markets, and which are still very great audiences for live music. So I'm just curious where you see the Montana music industry going.
I think the Montana music scene is a really interesting one right now, and I think it's getting discovered, and people are starting to realize it's always been discovered here, and people always have been big music supporters here. But I think you're starting to see the Live Nations of the world take more note, and you're starting to see them move into these markets a little bit more aggressively. We're at an advantage in the Missoula market, and potentially in the Bozeman market, in that there's really only room for one venue of the Wilma size. I don't think this market could support two Wilmas. At the club level, top hat level, maybe it could, but at the Wilma level, and we're going to find out at the amphitheater level how long that can go on. But it makes it a little easier to protect these markets and defend yourself against the Live Nations of the world, because for us, it's all about controlling the rooms. And one of the reasons for us in the Montana market that we're buying and investing in our rooms is this is one of the industries still in the world, if you control the bricks and mortar, you control the market. And Live Nation may want to come into this market, but the only way a Live Nation can come into a Bozeman, come into a Missoula, is they got to drop $5-6 million on a venue, they got to drop $1 million on a liquor license, and then they got to go to head-to-head with a promoter that's local in this market and spending money. So, from our standpoint, I think you're going to see a more robust Montana music scene. I do think you're going to see the Live Nations of the world and AEGs of the world try to come into this market, and you're going to see some somewhat fierce competition, particularly in the outdoor venue market. I envision Live Nation getting more aggressive on that side. I think from a customer standpoint, it'll be great. You'll have more options to choose from. You'll see more live music. From a promoter standpoint, it could be quite a battle. I mean, it'll be interesting from our standpoint as an independent promoter, with all the things we're doing, getting ready for that day, how we can compete against the worlds of the Live Nations.
I have a question. How many shows a year do you honestly think Live Nation does in Montana?
You know, I think in the summer market, they're gonna do more, but I think overall,
Cruston's already talking about it.
yeah, I mean, we know what they're
But
doing.
we're sitting here talking, I'm not defending Live Nation, but we're just using them as an example, and we're kind of just talking a lot of shit on them. How many shows do you honestly think they do in Montana every year?
You know, I think that's a question. I think the more.
I bet it's less than 10.
Oh, no, it's already more than 10. They're already doing more than 10. If you take their billing shows, Adams Center shows, and shows they put out in the Big Sky where the Knitting Factory historically is booked, I think you're gonna see way more than 10. And I think what's more important for a promoter like me is those bigger shows are where you make the money.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard to make a living at a Top Hat. You know, club shows are tough. And if you start getting cherry picked off by the big shows from the Live Nations, that's a problem as an independent promoter.
Yeah.
But I think they're doing more than 10. I bet you see them do 40 or 50 shows in the Montana market in the next couple of years.
Yeah, because I mean, what we're seeing, like from my experience, is they're doing the tour deals, but I wouldn't say they probably really have much of a hold in the club market.
You know, they don't have a hold in the club market because Billings Club is owned by an independent promoter. Bozeman doesn't have a club yet, and Missoula clubs are owned by us, and
Yeah.
none of us are letting them in our rooms. But I think you are seeing with the acquisition of a Creston and the strategy of Live Nation starting to buy promoters in these tertiary markets, those promoters are going to start coming into the club scene or the Wilma level scene or the Adam level scene, and they are getting more aggressive. That's what Live Nation's doing with this strategy by buying independent promoters, in my opinion. They're trying, that's their way of getting into these markets that they haven't historically been in.
Rapinoe's job is to manage the stock price, okay? And John Malone's in his board. He's gotta grow his flywheel, okay? And they've pretty much maxed out the major markets, okay? So the only place left for them to go is to start finding these smaller, you're 100% right, these smaller promoters, okay? And in order to keep feeding stuff into the flywheel, you've gotta find somewhere.
Agreed.
Nick, I have a question. You just acquired the Osprey Field, and you planning, and the paper said you're planning on doing 8 to 10 shows next year?
Probably more 4 or 5 shows
Okay,
next
4
year.
or 5. Do you think that, you know, I've been in the music market here for years and years and watched the ebb and flow, and it's now at a high point. Do you think it's ever gonna hit the saturation point where if you book 4 or 5 sellouts, you know, you bring a fish down there, somebody like that, is that gonna affect your amphitheater? I mean, there's only so much discretionary income to go around. How do you foresee that coming to fruition?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we definitely are cognizant of that and don't want to saturate the market. I tell you, 40% of the tickets at the amphitheater came from more than 200 miles away. So,
That's really good.
you know, one is a draw. I think we market heavily. 2 minutes. Yeah, we market heavily in Boise. We go to Spokane. We go to Calgary. We go to Portland. We go to Seattle. We digitally advertise in all these markets, and I think that's the key, is becoming more of a destination venue. I would tell you with Pearl Jam this summer, Chris Stapleton, Big Sky Amphitheater doing its 5, 6, 7 shows it did, Travelers Rest, the Wilma shows we did, and the 20 shows we did at the amphitheater, we didn't hit saturation in this market this summer. So I don't know what the point is, but we haven't seen it yet.
We haven't had a recession in a few years.
No, true.
So one point I wanted to ask is that we are obviously seeing way more internationally or nationally popular acts, but at the same time, it seems like we've lost a lot of venues for local music and for people to have an opportunity to play. Is that just a casualty of people spending so much money and going to so many of these larger shows that?
I take issue with that, actually. We have done over 100 local shows since the first of the year. So you hear that a lot, but I would totally disagree with it. We do a local show every Wednesday. We do 2 local shows. We do a local Friday early show.
But there used to be 6 or 8 bands playing every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, and that just doesn't happen. So I I know you're promoting local shows and that, but the local music scene is just not what it used to be, and I just wondered if,
Yeah, I guess I think that's true. The local music scene isn't what it used to be, but I also think the burden is a little bit on the local musician to be relevant. And I think you have a large group of local musicians that are still playing music that was popular 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think the burden, it's our burden to make sure we help grow the bands that are relevant. It's the artist's burden to develop music that the current Missoulian wants to hear. There's no question, though, the ticketing, having the amount of ticketed shows that we're having in this market is hurting the cover market for local musicians. I think that's true. But I also think there's an opportunity for local musicians in this scene and in this environment to, if they're playing relevant music, to be relevant and to get, at least on our stage, and be promoted by us and grown by us.
I wanted to make one quick
I'm
note.
so sorry, and we're out of time. After
One
you make
quick
your
note, I
announcements,
just wanted to reference, I quoted Alanya as saying it's just about the music, but it really was Maria. So, thank you, Maria. I'm sorry that I attributed your quote to the wrong source.
Hey, let's give them a big hand.